we're still on assessing the health history, and aside from all the physical and social things that we've assessed already, it's also important to assess the cultural and spiritual aspect of a patient. Okay, so this is included in uh, managing the patient's holistic care kasi. Okay, so this philosophy emerged from the concept of humanism and holism based on a mutual understanding of a person's physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. So it's believed that the human being, as you know naman, is not just a physical aspect or a physical being. So there are a lot of things that makes one. So that included there will be your spiritual and your cultural dimension. So what's important here is to understand diversity of individuals. So that you have to always note na iba-iba po ang individuals, especially now that usong-uso na po ang migration. So that when migration is setting in, definitely there is diversity in a certain place. So if you would take note na lang of how many countries the Filipinos are in, 'di ba? So, 'yun ang isang example ng diversity in a certain country or in a certain area. Okay, what's important in this concept is eh, the concept of equality. Today we will be having now the discussion on culture, its concepts and its terms. Okay. And then we now move on to cultural assessment and then spirituality, its terms, concepts, and how to assess also. Okay. So let's start with culture and defining it. So, importance: each person is born into a culture influenced by the place of birth and the family of origin. So, that is what makes our culture. Okay. So, an individual's culture is dynamic and shifts over the course of a lifetime. So, as we have mentioned, if you migrate in a different country, pwedeng Pilipino ka, okay, ang nationality mo ay Filipino, but if your culture or you grew up in an area na hindi na masyadong Filipino kasi kayo lang siguro ang Filipino doon, and then the rest are, for example, Americans, typically is that nagshi-shift na yung culture mo into an American culture, but still maintaining your nationality as a Filipino. Okay, so it's the nurse's responsibility to recognize the client's cultural perspectives at that. So if you now look at or tawag doon, yung makahalubilo ka na ng isang Filipino who grew up in America, it's different in terms of acts, the way of life, the way of thinking, to a person now who is a Filipino who grew up in the Philippines. Okay, so magkaiba yon. So anyway, so culture is defined to be thoughts, communications, actions, customs, beliefs, values, and institutions of racial, ethnic, religious, or social groups. So any group that you belong to, for example, religious group man yan, ethnic group man yan, okay, or a group that share a common belief. For example, naku, lobat pa ako, wait lang. Ano ba ang isang example ng group who share a common belief? For example, the way of eating. Okay, for example, a group of vegetarians. Ayan. So that ang tendency is that you believe or you have a certain belief on the way of eating. So that's still a culture. Okay. So culture is a totality of socially transmitted behavioral patterns, arts, beliefs, values, customs, life ways, and all other products of human work and thought characteristic of a popular or people that guide their worldview and decision making. Okay, this is according to Purnell and Polanka in 2008. So basically, when you talk about the influence of the culture, it definitely influence your worldview and decision making. Okay, so as we have mentioned, the two Filipinos a while ago, one who grew up in the States and one who grew up in the Philippines, they have different worldviews. They have different ways of decision making. Okay, however, because of the internet access now, we are more aware of cultures in outside the Philippines or outside your place of area or place of residence. So, ang tendency is that you now adopt cultures or you now follow cultures that are swak with your taste. Okay? Because you're already aware of the different cultures. An example of that would be the way of eating. During our times when there was no internet, our way of eating was influenced by our culture where we're at or what we're aware of. So the culture of yung pagpapakain ng parents namin, kamag-anak, or within the Philippines lang na culture of way of eating. However, now because there is already an exposure to a new information like paano ba kumain yung taga-ibang bansa, we now tend to adopt it. And hence, the manner of eating now of Filipinos is strongly influenced by the Western, di ba? Very fast food, ano tayo, oriented, and so on. So that's now an influence because na rin of the changing culture, which is the presence na rin of internet. So, definition of concepts, ayan. So, aside from defining culture, you also need to define some of the words that are related to it. For example, a subculture composed of two people who have a distinct identity. Okay? So, within a culture, di ba, kahit pare-parehas po tayong Filipino, hindi po lahat ng Filipino ah, parehas ang worldview, parehas mag-decision making. Why? Because, for example, within a culture, you have another culture in, for example, a family. So magkaiba, magkapitbahay sila, pero magkaiba sila ng way or worldview or decision making. Kasi hindi naman iisa yung source ng culture natin. So yung nabibuild din yung culture inside the home makes you different also from other families who create also their own subculture. Okay? So that hindi pwedeng sabihin, Pilipino ka naman, ba't ka ganyan? It's because we now create our subculture in an area where we're at. So, for example, the unit, okay, which is the home. Race, thought of in terms of social and cultural characteristics as well as ancestry. So, syempre, yung race na yan hindi nababago kahit kung saan ka lupalop ng mundo mapunta because that will be always traced in your ancestry. Nationality refers to the sovereign state or country where an individual has membership. Etong nationality na to, pwedeng mag-iba kasi nga, for example, you were already born in the States, you may be a Filipino but already an American citizen. Okay? So multicultural, multiple patterns of identification or crosses several cultures, lifestyles, sets of values, which is used interchangeably with bicultural, biracial, multiracial, or multi-ethnic. So that because nga of uh, technology these days, migration, ease in traveling to other countries, usong-uso na po ang multicultural na concepts. Okay? So that may mga nakikita na kayo dito, Koreano, pero parang mas Pilipino pa sila sa atin. Yung ganon. Or Filipino na nagpunta sa States na mas Amerikano pa kaysa doon sa mga ibang Americans because it now is a mixture already of cultures. Okay. Ethnicity, I remember nga when I was in Australia ba, or Europe, basta yon. Meron sinabi yung Filipino na, alam niyo bang usong-usong maging Asian? O, di ba? Usong-uso ang maging Asian. What does that mean? Okay, because they see now that Asians are thriving in a lot of areas. In tech, Indians yon. In healthcare, Filipinos yon. In, basta ganon, maraming Asians na nagsa-thrive. Why? It's already a combination kasi of Asians being resilient, hardworking, value-laden, tapos lumaki sa States. So sila yung nagta-thrive kasi, for example, the whites, Americans for example, magaling silang mag-English or yun, exposed sila sa US, but they aren't that resilient comparing it to a Phil-Am who was, tawag doon, raised by a Filipino. Parang gano'n. So, iba pa rin kasi yung pagdidisiplina ng Asian, Filipino man yan, Indian man yan, or Korean or whatever. Iba ang pagpapalaki pa rin kahit nasa ibang bansa. Versus now, an American parent na nagre-raise ng isang child. So that nagiging maganda yung kombinasyon kasi nga andun yung disiplina but at the same time, the Filipino or the Asian has the exposure already of an American. So kung mapapansin niyo yun ang mga maraming nagsa-thrive na kunwari na lang YouTube influencers or any sa social media, ang daming American citizens na pero Asian ang kanilang race. And yun ang maganda kasi maganda yung maganda ang disiplina or values, family values ng Asian. Yung respect for parents, yung napapalo or napapagalitan, yung ganon. Kasi sa US, di ba, you're all aware naman na pag pinagalitan mo yung anak mo, may 911 na kaagad. Yung ganon. So that iba yung pagpapalaki talaga. Tapos lumaki ka pa sa state. So ang tendency is that you really will be excelling. Okay? So ethnicity viewed as a relationship among individuals who believe that they have distinctive characteristics that make them a group. So itong ethnicity na to, in the Philippines alone, ang daming ethnicity or in the Cordillera alone, 'di ba? Ang dami ng ethnicity. So usually kung saan ka kung anong province mo, yun ang basic na ethnicity pag pinag-uusapan dito sa Philippines. So for example na in the Cordillera, there are a lot of ethnicities. So the Cordilleran alone has a lot of sub-ethnicities pa. Okay? So they share actually kasi pag sinabi mong ethnicity, they share common customs, kunyari the way they celebrate. For example na lang mga fiesta, how do they celebrate deaths, weddings, ganon. So kanya-kanyang practices kasi yun. And it is shown because of a certain ethnicity source. Religion, alam naman na natin yan, beliefs, practices, and ethical values about the divine or superhuman power worshipped as the creators and rulers of the universe. So iba-iba na naman yan. And to date, dati kasi parang Christianity and Muslim lang. I mean, yung mga major religions. Ngayon, within Christianity, marami na rin nagsa-stem out. Even nga within the Roman Catholic, di ba, may mga parang subsect ba ang tawag doon, yung mga ganon. Okay? So that as the population now gets to increase, the groups also tend to increase. Example of that would be religion. The goal of cultural nursing is culturally congruent care or care that fits the person's life patterns, values, and a set of meanings. So it's not kunwari nasa Pilipinas ka, sundin mo ang Filipino culture, not. It's not applicable in healthcare. Naintindihan? So kunyari ay kumpara na lang kunwari traffic rules. If you're in the Philippines, follow traffic rules in the Philippines. Pwede 'yon. Pero when it comes to cultural, I mean in healthcare, it needs to be a culturally congruent care. So for example, if your patient is a Korean, you now will be adjusting your care to their culture. Okay? So it has to be a culturally congruent care or a religious group. For example, you now have a patient whose religious affiliation would be having a certain practice, like for example, blood, yung refusal of blood transfusion, then we have to adapt to their culture. Hindi pwedeng, hindi ma'am, kailangan po. Hindi pwedeng ganun. Okay? So that nag-iiba kapag healthcare na po ang pinag-uusapan. Okay? So, very big dito when we talk about culture and healthcare will be transcultural nursing. So according to this was conceptualized by Madeline Leininger. So he now made a theory which is called your transcultural nursing. So ito yung kanyang parang pinaka-paradigm wherein which he mentions, andyan pa rin si Adpai, pero if you will notice dun sa kanyang, hindi masyadong malinaw eh, i-zoom nyo na lang pag nag-review kayo. It now is, when you talk about mga care in health, maraming factors ang magko-contribute. And definitely kasama dyan ang tawag doon yung culture ng isang tao. Okay? So hindi pwedeng ipag-isang tabi yung culture. For example, nasa Pilipinas ka kaya hindi pwedeng ganon. Okay? So that nagkataon lang na nagkasakit siya sa Pilipinas. Ganon 'yon. Okay? So that ganon ang tawag doon, uh, take ng transcultural nursing. Okay, so it's the holistic view of the person, including now the culture. So that it's very important that a nurse now will develop cultural sensitivity. So when you say cultural sensitivity, it now is a process also. Hindi kasi lahat ng tao culturally sensitive. But as a nurse, you have to develop this skill of cultural sensitivity. Now, ngayon na lang, di ba, you have classmates but not all eh. You already have classmates na meron tayo sa school natin, may Chinese. Mayroon tayong nag-graduate na yata, may Korean. Yung ganon. So that alone is in a way starting you to practice already cultural sensitivity. So that what or how is cultural sensitivity developed? So actually, ito yung mga steps niya. First is to be culturally aware. Okay? So when you talk about cultural awareness, it is basically your self-examination on how you know a certain culture. Ganon. Okay? So for example, you're talking to a Korean, ano ba kasi ang alam mong kultura ng Korean? Ang alam mo lang K-pop. So hindi yun enough to be culturally aware. Di ba? Okay? So move on to the next step, which is cultural knowledge, which is obtaining sufficient comparative knowledge of diverse group. So it's not just pagiging K-pop when you talk about Korean kasi dun sila sikat. Okay? But uh, you have to also take note what are the other what are the other knowledge you need to know when it comes to their culture. So for example na lang yung kanilang healthcare, mm, para rin silang Chinese na may mga supplements, hindi man supplements, pero may mga yung kapag kunwari lagi silang may soup for a certain condition. 'Di ba? Meron silang soup na kung may hangover, may soup kung may sipon, may mga ganon ang culture nila. Okay? So when you talk about the next step is cultural skills, which is being able now to assess social, cultural, and biophysical factors influencing client care. So that in a way, knowing that this is their culture, you are already aware na rin ano ba ang nagko-contribute dun sa practice nilang yon. Ganon. Okay? And then cultural encounters where you are now engaging in cross-cultural interactions, providing learning of other cultures and opportunities. Okay? So, kunwari, you're in-depth already in preparations of the soup for managing now certain illnesses. The mere fact that you ask them, paano ba gawin to, tas ginagawa mo na rin para sa pasyente mo, is already the cultural encounter part. Okay? And the next is cultural desire, where there is motivation and commitment to caring that moves an individual to learn from others. Okay? So ito na yung actual making. Ikaw na mismo nagluluto, ikaw na mismo yung sa encounter kasi aalamin mo pa lang eh. Okay? Naha-heighten lang yung interest mo. Dito, ikaw na mismo yung nagpa-practice ng culture nila. Okay? Hence, developing now your cultural sensitivity. Okay? Yan. Ganon nagde-develop yung sensitivity natin. Hindi lang yung awareness. It doesn't stop there. Okay? So, what are the factors? Okay? So we have their affecting approach to providers and affecting disease, illness, and health state. So, of course, when you talk about approach to providers, marami ang kailangan i-consider. Example na lang, yung ethnicity. Okay? Another example would be generational status. So, iba kapag young ang caregiver, tapos matanda yung ang tawag doon, ang patient. Okay? Ganon din sa educational level. For example, you are or your client is yung depending on yung kung anong natapos. Yan. Religion also. Okay? Previous health experiences. So in this area, uh, laging lalabas dyan what was the experience prior to the healthcare experience today. So for example, second time na ng isang foreigner na ma-ospital sa hospital ng Philippines. The acceptance of the second time na healthcare will basically be dependent. Ano bang na-experience niya nung unang hospitalization? So kapag kunwari very traumatic, ang tagal-tagal na nag-antay sa ER, na-charge ng ang laki-laki, hindi naman siya na-satisfy sa healthcare, typically ganun pa rin ang iisipin niya doon sa second na healthcare niya. Okay? So ang tendency ay lilipat ako ng hospital kasi yan. I didn't have a good experience with this hospital, so lilipat po ako, yung ganun. Okay? So also affecting the approach would now be your occupation and income level. So of course, lagi na lang dehado if you don't have that much income. Okay? You don't have enough means to support. Okay? Beliefs about time and space also. So itong aspect naman na ito is about your kunwari lang sa space, yung limits. So for example, the nurse, uh, kunwari sa religious, kunwari a Muslim and a male nurse, a female Muslim to a male nurse. So typically, it is now yung parang laging may observation or may parang maging mas careful ka as a male nurse to be interacting now with a female Muslim patient, gano'n. Kasi meron at merong, 'di ba, yung may cultural ano pa rin sila limitations, 'yan. And communication needs and preferences. So the more the patient now would be needing the communication, for example, mas hindi niya kasi naiintindihan, kaya mas kailangan lagi kang nag-health educate, lagi kang nagfa-follow up versus somebody who uh, pag unang turo mo pa lang, alam na niya kaagad yung gagawin. Okay? So another would be the factors affecting disease, illness, or health state. So your biomedical variation. So example of a biomedical variations would now be your physical self. So for example na lang yung age, okay? So the very very young and the very very old are the most vulnerable, kaya mas maingat tayo. Versus kapag yon, young adult, young older adult, or mid-age adult, I mean. So mas ano yan, mas kumbaga sa uh, frailty, mas hindi frail kumpara sa very very old or the very very young. Okay. So also the nutrition and dietary habits. Typically Filipinos have a bad nutrition habit where we have now the high fat, high high salt, low fiber diet, high sugar pa na diet. So kaya yun minention natin na ah, 'pag dumarating na ng older adult age, ang tendency ng Pilipinong isipin is magkakaroon ka na ng maintenance. Kasi nga gano'n yung kultura natin na kapag tumatanda na, nagkakasakit na, kaya kailangan na ng maintenance. As we have mentioned, in other countries, it's not like that. They don't need to get sick, or they don't necessarily get sick when they grow older. They don't necessarily die of sickness because they are old. They usually die, okay, because of old age, degeneration of the mechanisms of the body, not necessarily disease, like the Philippines, di ba? Okay, kasi nga yun yung culture natin. And pwedeng makita yan because of the nutrition that we are having. So family roles and organization and patterns. So example na lang will be, kunwari ang magkasakit ay ang head of the family. So kung head of the family na ang nagkakasakit, tendency is that affected buong pamilya. Although affected naman lagi ang buong pamilya kapag may nagkakasakit. Pero iba ang impact if the family head will now be the one, what do you call this, getting sick, di ba? Parang lumpong-lumpo ang buong family if the head of the family will be the one na sick. Kasi ang tendency is that the income stops or pauses, and definitely affecting now how they look at health, their daily living, mga ganyan. Organization also would talk about naman yung dynamics ng family. So when you talk about the dynamics of the family, it talks about ano ba, close-knit ba sila or lagi ba sila nag-aaway or source ba ng depression ng anak yung mga parents or vice versa, yung mga gano'n. Okay? So we have to look also at the patterns kasi nga malaki ang effect ng family, their roles, and their influence on a certain patient. Pregnancy and childbirth practices will also be included. So, example na lang ng childbirth practice is yung paggamit ng childbirth is including now the number of children the family or the clan usually have. Nung unang panahon kasi paramihan ng anak, which is fine kasi madali lang ang buhay nun. But to date, tendency is that they now space their births or limit their childbirth. Nung panahon namin, mga 3, ganon ang average ng childbirth. To date, when I was talking to my son, 2 pa lang anak nila pero ayaw na nilang mag-anak ulit. When I was talking to my daughter, ayaw pang mag-anak, gusto aso or pusa na lang, yung gano'n. So those are varying na kahit na same ang culture namin. Okay? So death rituals also, for example na lang sa native ay sa native na Cordilleran, when they have a death in the family, uh, basta very grand. Sino dito ang ang belonging to the Cordilleran clan? 'Di ba? Ang daming kinakatay, celebration-wise imbitado lahat ng kakilala nung namatay or nung family nung namatay, gano'n. Tas ang tagal, tas may pakanyaw, yung mga gano'ng rituals. So, depends on the culture. And then religious and spiritual beliefs and practices. O example na lang, how do you kunwari ay the need for blood transfusion. Not all will be accepting blood transfusion. So for example, if I'm not mistaken, the Seventh-day Adventist, they refuse blood transfusion because of a belief in the sacredness of blood or something to that effect. Okay, so kailangan at naapektuhan yung health decisions. So for example, a matter of life and death kasi nga kailangan ng blood transfusion, nawe-weigh nila diyan yung religious beliefs nila. And all we need to do is to respect. After encouraging or telling them the pros and cons, all we need to do is to tell them na lang or to respect na lang their beliefs. Okay? Healthcare practices also, example of a healthcare practice would be, kumain na ba kayo ng breakfast? O kaya ay yung gano'n, yung, dietary practice 'yun. Kasi yung iba, yung parang kasama sa healthcare practice nila yung kunwari, very valued nila yung weight nila. Okay, so kailangan, "Ma'am, hindi na po ako nagbe-breakfast kasi aside from nakakatipid na po ako." ah, they nilulusot nila yung nakakapag-practice na daw sila ng, what do you call that, intermittent fasting, oh, 'di ba? Kasi ang last na kain nila kagabi, ta's ang next na kain nila after pa ng lecture na 'to. So in a way, they've fasted for more than 8 hours, okay? What else are healthcare practices? The check-up. Oh, gaano sila kadalas magpa-check-up, annual ba or kung may sakit lang, yung mga gano'n. Aside from that, ano pa bang healthcare practices? When you feel something, pain, for example, fever, ano usual na ginagawa mo? Do you go over the counter agad na drugs or you now rest first, drink a lot of water muna, supplements, yung mga gano'n. So, di ba ibang healthcare practice? Healthcare practitioners, sino ang nilalapitan kapag may sakit? Okay, so nag-health center ka ba or diretso ka na agad sa consultant, yung mga gano'n. Unlike in other countries kasi, for example in Australia, hindi ka basta-basta makakadiretso sa consultant, laging family medicine muna. Laging nasa community tapos may doktor dun na nagpa-practice ng family medicine. So wala kang choice kundi dumaan talaga dun. And then sila ang bahalang mag-refer. In the Philippines kasi, kung may pera ka, diretso ka sa consultant, kayang-kaya or puwedeng-puwede 'yun. Okay? Sa dami kasi ng healthcare practitioners natin dito comparing now to other countries. Sa ibang country, 'pag hindi emergency, kailangan mong pumila ng appointment. Okay? So kung yung bukol mo today ay 1 centimeter, by the time you get to have an appointment, lalaki na. Kasi medyo matagal ang appointment setting sa ibang bansa. But pag emergency naman, okay lang. Diretso naman sa ER and immediate care. Okay? And the environment as well. So when we talk about environment, of course, an environment that is cleaner, wider, more peaceful. Sila yung mga mas healthy ang state kumpara sa environment na mas madumi, masikip, maliit yung living space, I mean, and medyo maingay at magulo. Those are some of the environments then na mas unhealthy yung mga states. Okay? So, can you imagine Philippines na lang? So, Philippines alone is an environment or a country wherein the environment is as not so good. Kasi maraming pollution, basura, and so on. Marami tayo compared to our land. Okay? I mean, the population is already 120 million, I think, kumpara sa land area natin na ang liit-liit. Kasi sa ibang bansa, mas malaki ang kanilang land for their population. Okay? Again, Australia, for example. Bakit ako nag-example lagi ng Australia? Kasi in a way, parang ideal na country siya kasi ang luwag-luwag-luwag ng daan, wala pang mga bahay maluwag na yung daan. Sementado na yung daan. I mean, ang luwag ng space nila for their population. And in fact, kaya nga sila nanghihingi dati ng mga migrants. Hindi man nanghihingi, nag-encourage ng migrants. Ngayon, hindi na sila masyado nag-encourage kasi puntahan na talaga siya ng iba't ibang nationality. Kaya nga naghihigpit sila sa pag-accept na ng students, ng mga pumupunta sa kanila. Okay? Comparing it in the Philippines, although ang ganda-ganda ng Pilipinas, the problem is yung control ng population. Ang dami-dami, ang traffic, ang liliit ng daan, mga ganon. Okay? So, mako-compare mo na kaagad. Okay, so in this table, there is now cultural variations of traditional healers and practices. So makikita natin dyan, Asian, African, Native American. So let's start with the Asian traditions. So I think you're aware naman kasi Asian naman kayo. But what is bida when it comes to Asian traditions in medicine is Chinese uh, practice. 'Di ba? Kasi sila yung mas sikat sa buong mundo actually. Sa Philippines, wala tayong masyadong binibidang healthcare practice. Kung hindi, ang pinakasikat is hilot. Hilot or massage na yung parang hindi siya massage na shiatsu, yung mga ganun. So, healing massage siya. Okay? So, sa traditional Chinese medicine, herbs, okay, maraming herbs na ginagamit to manage a certain disease because it's believed that that nature has a natural pharmacy. Okay? So that from herbs alone na gumagaling yung mga sakit. Okay? So preventive and healing practices natin is to balance now the yin and the yang. Okay, so they believe in the balance of the cold and the hot. Okay, and hot and cold conditions. So wearing of amulets or crystals, and then naniniwala din sila. And then acupuncture, cupping, and moxibustion. So that actually in the Philippines, marami na rin nagpa-practice ng ganyan. And that is Asian Chinese tradition. And in fact, also in the States, in Europe, in Australia, basta iba-ibang countries, sikat na sikat ang Chinese medicine. Okay? So that, kasi may scientific basis naman siya. Okay? So it has something to do with meridians, releasing now or balancing now the chi, mga ganon. So accepted din siya ng marami actually puti na nagpa-practice or nag-a-adapt na ng Chinese medicine. Next is your African traditions. So ang belief naman nila is yung magico herbalist or the hoodoo, also known as your conjurers. Pag sinabi kasing conjurers, parang ito yung mga nasasaniban, mga ganon, okay, sa African tradition. Or the old lady, granny, or the lay midwife. Sila yung mga healers, traditional healers sa Africa. And their preventive and healing practice is magical and herbal mix of herbs, roots, rituals, talismans, or amulets. So, marami pa rin silang belief sa herbs. May ano nga sila recipes, folk recipes, okay, for conjure and spell work. Okay, so yung parang ano ba yun, yung parang sa mga pelikula yung 'pag yung may ritual-ritual gano'n, mga anting-anting, ano ba tawag dun, mga what do you call this, yung pang-attract ng lalaki mga gano'n, pang-attract ng loved one, yung mga gano'n. Gano'n sa Conjure and Spellbook, okay. So, hindi masyadong sikat 'to kasi parang voodoo ano, eh, may voodoo aspect. So, hindi naman lahat ng tao ay into that. Although a lot of people are doing this na rin. For example, when I watched TikTok the other night, maraming ano, tawag dun, yung mga although hindi pa voodoo, pero yung mga hula-hula, mga gano'n. So, medyo aligned sa gano'n. Okay, amulets also, believing that when you are wearing amulets, yung mga gano'n, protection, healing, mga gano'n. So, parang ang katumbas nito sa Asian tradition is the use of crystals. Yan, sa crystals naman, yung use ng mga stones, gano'n. Okay, next would be your Native Americans. Okay, so Native Americans weren't white, 'di ba? So sila yung ganito yung itsura. Okay, para silang Alaskan natives. Ah, okay, so they believe in shamans or medicine men. So sila yung mga healers dati. So the respect for nature and avoiding evil spirits, use masks, herbs, sand paintings and amulets. Yun yung way nila of tawag doon of healing. Yan. So sa pelikula 'di ba gamit na gamit 'yan. Next is Hispanic or Mexican, Central and South America, Spain, Portugal traditions. So folk healers, parang may ganyan din tayo sa Pilipinas, 'di ba, albularyo, whom they call curandero or curandera or brujo or bruja. Yan. Sa atin kasi pag sinabing bruja, maligalig na tao, but they actually talk about healer, okay? Witch nga lang, witch. So hindi siya yung ah, pwede siyang pwede siyang witch na bad side. Yerbero, partera. Okay, partera is their midwife. Yerbero is a herbalist. So, ganun yung kanilang beliefs. So, again, their beliefs in healing and prevention is prevention of disease is hot-cold balance for diet, herbs, amulets, prayers to God and saints, spiritual reparations for sins, avoiding evil eye caused by jealousy and envy. So, may mga beliefs silang ganyan. So, kunyari ay nagkasakit, nabati, mga ganun. So, parang may resemblance sa ating Filipino culture. Okay? Yan. So they believe in yung pausok, herbs, ganyan, in healing. And is it the last? Western or European traditions, uh, before homeopathy, yung typical ang Western tradition is typical na meds, pharmaceuticals. Okay? However, nowadays, yun, dumadami na ang, pag sinabi mo kasing cultural tradition, homeopathy or homeopathic physicians. Ito yung mga physicians who make use of yung mga supplements to heal, not necessarily mga drugs, yung pharmaceutical drug preparations. So makikita niyo ang mga gamot nila, ang liliit yan, katulad ng nasa image. Very small, that is packed with nutrients. Okay? So, dumadami na rin ang homeopathic practitioners kasi ang homeopathy is a branch of medicine. So, in the Philippines alone, meron tayo sa UP na ang kanilang specialization is homeopathy. Pero at least sila doctors. So sila ang in terms of reliability, license wise, homeopathic doctors or naturopathic doctors are anong tawag doon? Sila yung mas credibility wise kasi nga pinag-aralan nila and so on. Okay? So prevention and healing nila is maintaining now physical and emotional well-being with proper science. Ito yung pinaglalaban or ang edge nito, proper science-based modern nutrition, exercise, cleanliness, belief in, and faith in God. So itong mga maliliit na kapsula kasi medicines na kasi nila na to, actually they're not medicines because they are nutrition or nutrients nga. Sorry. Parang nagbi-believe sila ng balance ng nutrients inside the body to heal you. O, di ba? Okay? So, I'm geared toward naturopathy and yung mga tawag doon, herbal healing. Kaya, para akong traditional. Yan. So, cultural assessment. So, how do we assess culture? So, we now have our 4 C's of culture. Sorry. So, we have here pala muna the learn method. So, listen. So, how do you assess or how do you learn? How do you assess their culture or you know about their culture? First is to listen actively with empathy to the client's perception. Yan. Kasi kapag iba ang culture, lalo na kung hindi masyadong accepted mo as a person yung culture, parang hindi ka makikinig, hindi ka interesado. But as a nurse, you have to listen actively. And then explain what you think. Alam nyo na nga ba yung active listening? So when you say active listening, you are listening, tapos hindi naman sumasabat, pero you're trying to interact dun sa or you're trying to react dun sa mga sinasabi. That's active listening. Explaining what you think you heard or ask for clarification. So, kasi nga kung minsan the culture is wala siyang scientific basis. Oh, so paano ngayon yung or how do you explain? Yung parang ganon. So, you just usually beliefs ang explanation nila. It's believed that ganon or it's a practice that, ganun yung explanation nila. Kaya yung ibang mga cultures, questionable in other countries or for other people kasi nga walang scientific basis. Okay? Acknowledge the importance of what is said and what it means. So, regardless of what they are saying, all the responsibility of the nurse is to acknowledge, meaning to respect, to accept and respect. You don't need to practice it. You just need to respect. Accept mo na iba yung when you say accept, hindi yung accept para sa'yo, but accept na yan yung tradisyon nila, kaya kailangan nating bigyan ng importansya kasi importante sa kanila. Okay? And then recommend inclusive strategies. So when you say recommend inclusive strategies, we make sure that it's unang-una legal thing, pangalawa safe, yung papayag tayo at a certain extent na basta hindi mapapahamak si patient, it's fine. So for example, the praying, not all pray. Pero kunwari, yun ang belief nila, then i-allow natin na mag-pray. Pero hindi natin i-allow yung, for example, yung manner nila of praying would include bloodletting, yung mga ganon in the hospital, or yung mga ganon, yung mga ibang ritual na medyo invasive. So, nire-recommend lagi natin ano yung mga, or ina-allow lang natin yung mga, lalo na kung nasa hospital, kung ano yung legal at hindi nakakapahamak sa pasyente. And then negotiate the plan of care by collaboration. So, always kasi may culture na hindi pinapaniwalaan ng medical field. So that ang gagawin natin is we try to talk the patient into the medical solution. Example na lang yung blood transfusion. So sasabihin, ma'am, pinaka-importanting management sa kanya ngayon or else, mga ganyan. So sasabihin natin pros and cons, we'll try to encourage, but we stop there. Kasi not all will be accepting of a medical advice. Like for example, ngayong blood transfusion. So, nag-negotiate tayo, nakiki-collaborate tayo, sino ba ang pwedeng mag-encourage sa kanila as much as possible. Pero kung wala talaga, then it's fine. I mean, respect of culture at the end of the day ang pinaka-importante. Okay? So, what are the 4 C's of culture? Okay? What do you call your problem? So, yung iba kasi, konting, for example, cough and colds lang, sakit na sa kanila yun agad. Absent na, mga ganyan. In other cultures naman, cough, nakita lang nila yun as may initial invasion ka. So all I need to do is to strengthen my immune system. Parang ganon, yung hindi nila problema. Parang initial invasion, so the body needs to defend itself, ganon. Others naman, cough and colds pa lang, sakit na ang tingin nila. So, bili na yan ng gamot, mga ganun na agad. Okay? So, iba-iba. What do you think caused your problem? So, iba-iba rin ang cause. O kasi, it's karma, mga ganon. Yung ibang culture, ganon. I did something wrong and the universe now is making me suffer or something. Yung iba naman, as a matter of fact, kumbaga, kung bacterial infection o dala ng bacteria, kaya ako nagkaroon ng bacterial infection. Okay? How do you cope with the condition? So, yung coping, like for example na lang, over-the-counter meds ka ba or yung mga initial easy na mga remedies. Like for example, colds, cough and colds, diretso ka na ba agad sa over-the-counter meds or mag-ano ka muna, rest, uh, soup or anything na any liquid, mga increased fluid intake ka muna, yung ganun. Okay, so depending now on the culture kasi yun. And what are your concerns regarding the condition and or recommended treatment? So that, kunwari, pumunta siya sa isang healthcare provider, binigyan na agad siya ng gamot. Okay? Example na lang ako, hindi ako pala gamot na tao. Kaya hindi ako nagpapa-clinic agad. Kasi natural, sa clinic, they will give me agad medicines. I'm not the type who consumes a lot of medicine. I usually would, kunyari, sa cough and colds ko ngayon, kasi nagpuyat-puyat naggawa ng exam kagabi, I would just, kaya hindi ako nakapag-open ng camera kasi gusto ko, rested ang position ko ngayon. Kasi parang feeling ko, I'm not in my perfect condition or vacation mode lang ang peg kaya ganito yung feeling ko. But anyway, para akong lalagnatin, feeling ko kasi ganon. So that hindi ako agad magre-resort sa BioFlu, sa whatever, ano ba yung uso ngayon kasi, yung mga ganon. Kasi nga, I believe that itulog ko lang ulit to after the lecture, inumin ko lang yung maraming soup, fluids, magiging okay na ako. Ganon. Kasi I don't like na yung conditions ko na simple will now be yun, gamot agad ang gamot agad ang gagawin ko or kukunin. I mean, you take the medicine agad. Sorry, dumaan kasi yung apo ko. Napapasok ng school. Lola mode. Okay, anyway. So that is the culture na pampagaling ko yung mga apo ko because they're so cute. Yan. Okay? So, ganun yung sa culture ha. Hindi, so, kung kayo, meron kasi akong kakilala na basta sipunin lang ng ganito, meron na agad siyang nasal, yung mga nasal meds, yung mga pampa-decongest, hindi pa naman congested, mako-congest pa lang, yung ganon. So, kanya-kanyang belief kasi yun. So ako, I'd rather not take meds. Yung isa naman kakilala ko, he'd rather take meds agad, ganon siya. Okay? So again, respect of the culture or the beliefs. So, sa health traditions model, it is talking about viewing health holistically. Health daw is a complex, interrelated, threefold phenomenon that is as the balance of all aspects of the person. So that parang ito ang isang theory when you are talking about culture or assessing now culture. Sabi kasi dyan, balance daw yan para magkaroon ng view of care as holistic. Okay? So, that three would be the body, the mind, and the spirit. Okay? So, kasi when you talk about some of the treatments or healers, the body ang tinitignan nila. Okay? The body that has physiologic alterations. Yeah, so physical aspect alterations. The mind naman, cognitive processes, how you think. So for example, etong ubot sipon, kunyari, ang tingin ko, it's just my body, tawag doon, responding to an invasion. Kasi nga, ano yan di ba, cough and cold are body's mechanism para, it's an indication that my immune system is working against an invasion. So kahapon siguro, marami akong na-meet na tao na may virus, medyo napalipat sa akin, kaya nagmamanifest ako ngayon. Okay? Yung iba naman, ang tingin is, na-invade na yung katawan ko, kailangan ko ngayon gawan ng paraan para ma-heal agad yung cough and colds. Ganon. Iba kasi yung thinking. Ah, Kaya naggagamot na sila agad. Ako naman, okey lang 'yan, pabayaan mo magkalagnat or something kasi yung immune system natin is working against the virus or the bacteria. Kaya rest, fluids, gano'n. So kaya 'pag iba rin kasi yung thinking, nag-iiba rin yung reaction, okay. And the spirit, it's both positive and negative learned spiritual practices. So that when you talk about the spirit, it's relative. I mean,